Good evening. My name is Lori Zabata, and I'm a proud JWU alumna and the Director of Alumni Relations at Johnson & Wales University. Thank you for joining us for Alumni Executives Discuss Today's Evolving Workplace. We are thrilled to bring this program featuring outstanding alumni who've risen through the ranks of their respective companies and now are among the key decision makers at their organizations. We're grateful they have taken the time to be with us to share their experience and expertise and to answer your questions. Questions can be submitted throughout the session using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. These questions will be posed to our panelists at the conclusion of the presentation. I'd now like to introduce today's moderator, Dr. Maureen Dumas, Vice President of Advancement and University Relations. Maureen has held a higher education professional for the past 30 years. She has held numerous leadership positions throughout her career, including Dean of Admissions, Vice President of Experiential Education and Career Services, and her current role as Vice President of Advancement and University Relations at Johnson & Wales University. Throughout her career, she has served on numerous committees and task forces related to the issues of higher education. Maureen has presented at multiple conferences on the topic of assessment and student competencies in experiential education. In addition, she served as keynote speaker at the New England Association for Cooperative Education annual conference on the topic of innovative strategies for identifying and mitigating risk in experiential learning. And she served as a panelist at the New England Board of Higher Education Academic Officers Colloquium, focused on assessment and evaluation of experiential education. Maureen received her undergraduate degree from St. Anselm College, a master's degree from Boston University, and a doctorate from Northeastern University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Maureen Dumas.
Thank you, Lori, and good evening, everyone. I'm proud to be joined by our esteemed panel, and I'm excited for you to hear this discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. David Andrew, class of 1993, was born on a small island in the Caribbean and came to the United States with big dreams and business goals. After graduating college, David turned down several significant job offers to explore his entrepreneurial desires and passions. David built his business into a successful regional risk management brokerage firm. He later negotiated the purchase of a much larger firm and merged both operations. David maintained full risk management and operational responsibilities for the firm and quickly became known in the industry as the person you call when you just need it done. In 2013, David decided to sell his firm to accept a position with the global leader in risk management. He currently serves as Senior Vice President and Emerging Strategy Practice Leader for Marsh McLennan. The firm has more than 80,000 employees who uniquely collaborate to provide risk, strategy, and human capital advice to clients in over 150 countries. David's role as an emerging practice strategy leader is the only one of its kind in the entire firm. He has the responsibility of working with dynamic, entrepreneurial, and rapidly growing organizations. David is a member of a number of industry organizations and currently sits on the board of directors of the NRPB. Driven by his passion to inspire and help, David routinely speaks across the country to various groups. He lives in Western New Jersey with his wife, Maria, and his 2 children. Our next panelist is Gina Consulman, class of 1993. Gina joined Bluebird in August 2021 and serves as the Chief Financial Officer, overseeing finance, tax, accounting, treasury, insurance, and investor relations. She has more than 25 years of experience in finance, investor relations, strategy, and business development. Prior to joining Bluebird, she served as Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at Ironwood Pharmaceuticals. Before Ironwood, Gina served as Vice President and Corporate Controller at Analogic Corporation, a publicly held healthcare and security technology solutions company. There, she oversaw the company's global accounting and treasury teams. Prior to her work at Analogic, Gina served as Senior Director of Corporate Accounting at Biogen, where she led the accounting teams for the corporate and U.S. commercial business units. Gina currently serves as the member of the Board of Directors for the Assembly of Biosciences. She is a certified public accountant and began her career in public accounting at Ernst & Young. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from Johnson & Wales University and a Master's of Science in Taxation from Bentley University. Our last panelist that I would like to introduce you to tonight is Paul Damico, class of 1986. Paul is an accomplished and well-respected executive with more than 35 years of food service experience in the hospitality industry. Following graduation from Johnson & Wales University, Paul spent 13 years in various roles with Marriott Corporation, culminating with his role as Vice President of International Development, where he was responsible for restaurant development across 5 continents. In 1999, his entrepreneurial instinct came to life and co-founded Food Brand, a company that specializes in the development of restaurants in malls and airports. The company was sold to a private equity group, and Paul was named CEO of the company, now known as SSP America. In 2008, Paul joined Moe's Southwestern Grill as president. During his time with Moe's, he was named by Fast Casual magazine as a top 26 executive. He was also featured on the CBS hit series Undercover Boss. After 6 years with Moe's, Paul was promoted to group president by Focus Brands and was responsible for the oversight of McAllister Deli, Moe's Southwest Grill, Schlotsky's Deli, and eventually Auntie Annie's Pretzels, Carvel Ice Cream, and Cinnabon. As Focus Brands president of North America, Paul oversaw a $2.6 billion food service company made up of more than 5,000 restaurants. In 2017, Paul was recruited as CEO to lead a startup concept based in Chicago called NAF Middle Eastern Grill. His strategy was to prepare the brand for growth through a franchising model. He accomplished his goal and began selling franchises in 2018. In 2020, he was recruited as CEO to lead global franchise groups, more than 2,000 restaurant locations. Paul was again asked to film Undercover Boss, this time for Roundtable Pizza Brand. Earlier this year, he successfully sold GFG to Fat Brands for $442 million. He is currently the CEO of Experiential Brands, Fuzzy Taco Shops. Paul is a current board member of the National Restaurant Association's Fast Casual Industry Council. He is a philanthropist and advocate for children. In 2015, Paul was honored as the Restaurateur of the Year by the Georgia Restaurant Association. He was also recognized by Johnson & Wales University as a distinguished lecturer and was recently inducted into the World Association of Cooperative Education Hall of Fame. In 2016, Paul again was honored by Johnson & Wales University as they conferred upon him an honorary degree, a Doctor of Business Administration in Restaurant, Food, and Beverage Management. Most importantly, while at Johnson & Wales, Paul met his wife, Laura. They reside in Atlanta and are proud parents of their 3 grown daughters. Welcome to all of our panelists. Now that we have learned your talents and experiences, we have about 45 minutes to go through our questions. I'd like to start with Paul. Paul, you've had tremendous success in your career since graduating from Johnson & Wales University. What are the leadership traits that you believe you have that have sustained you throughout your career?
Thanks, Maureen. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. As I look back on my career, there's really always one thing that jumps out at me, and that is my servant leadership style. I have practiced this my entire career, first with hourly employees, and then ultimately through the boardroom. I'm always the first one to the meeting. I'm the last one to leave. I'm the first one to clean up, and I never waited to be told to have those types of behaviors with whether it be an hourly employee at a Burger King or in the boardroom at Global Franchise Group. So servant leadership for me is something that I practice virtually every day and have for over 30 years.
Paul, that's terrific. Modeling behavior and showing employees that you're willing to do anything to get the job done, I think is critical for any success. And we thank you. And servant leadership has been proven in research to be a successful model and way for leaders to be in a position to be vocal and to be in support of their employees. When I think of servant leadership, many times individuals think about that they're a nice guy, that they're there to always be there for the employees, but there's always difficult decisions that need to be made in an organization. How do you balance that as a servant leader?
Yeah, I would never say that that everything is easy in the workplace, right? I think it's one of the other attributes I think of servant leadership is really taking the time to get to know the team. And I say getting to know the team at a pretty granular level. And that really opens doors for early and often communication with the team. Again, whether that team is the board or the hourly employees. And so that's something, again, that I feel is part of servant leadership. Something that is really neglected a lot is setting clear expectations and clear strategy. And I think if you take the time to do that properly with any given situation, it makes things happen easier in the workplace. It seems like something very simple, but I've seen it neglected so many times in my career. And so I urge early managers that I interact with on a regular basis, get to know the team and set clearly definable expectations and communicate often.
Terrific, terrific advice, Paul. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'll start with you, Gina. We've all had moments in our careers when we look back and we realize how you reacted shaped your future. Could you share with us a defining moment that you had in your career that changed the trajectory of your life and your work?
Sure. Well, first, just thanks so much for the invitation to be here. I am just thrilled and honored, and looking forward to hearing from Paul and David as well, my two panelists. I don't know if it was actually included in my bio, but before the life science time that you shared in my bio, I was also at a company called Varian Semiconductor, and I was there for just over 8 years. And there was a time where I felt like I had been there for several years, and I worked my way up, and I was the assistant controller. And I felt that I was ready to be the controller. So I approached the VP of Finance and the CFO, and I made my case for why I should be promoted to controller, and expected to, they would agree. And actually, I got some really tough feedback, and they told me I wasn't ready. And it was incredibly hard to hear, because I had put myself forward and made my case, and then realized that I viewed my role and my abilities in a different light than these other two individuals who I very much respected in their roles. And the feedback they gave me was, you know what, you're absolutely great at everything you do related to finance. We have no question about the numbers. You file all the SEC documents on time. Everything finance, just runs smoothly, and we feel great relying on you. But we can't promote you to a VP at a controller level unless you really understand the business. And our VPs need to understand the business, not just finance. And while that feedback was incredibly hard to hear, I took it. I listened to them, and they actually removed me from my finance role for 6 months. Varian was a semiconductor company. They stuck me in a clean room. I gowned up just like the Intel commercials. I did all kinds of work in the clean room, and I learned about manufacturing and supply chain, and it was incredibly valuable feedback. And I take that to this day. I'm not even in semiconductor, I'm in life sciences, but they were right in that in order to be a really good CFO and make the right decisions across the organization, I need to know a little bit about what's going on in every single department. And so I try to make sure that I do that and meet with leaders and team members across the company. But then I also try to make sure that my teams are getting that same advice and that same opportunities. Are the same opportunities.
Isn't that great? That's terrific. Having a boss or a supervisor or a leader in your organization who would allow you to step away from your responsibilities and learn something new, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I have a second part, and I don't mean to dominate and take too long, because
please share
on my second responses or whatever. I'll be very short. I do really want to hear from the other panelists as well, just like everybody else does. But that was my go-to answer when I shared my feedback. But I realized this morning, as I was thinking about and preparing for the panel, that there was something even before I started my career that made a significant difference in my life. And that was actually, and why I'm so happy to be here. Just attending Johnson & Wales has completely changed the trajectory of my life. And if I share just a little bit, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. My father never graduated from high school. My mom did graduate from high school, but she worked at an egg factory in a processing plant for minimum wage. There was never an expectation that I would go to college. Everybody just assumed I would graduate from high school and get a job at the local factory. And I didn't get that kind of guidance. And somehow I made my way to Johnson & Wales. Johnson & Wales provided me not just with the education, but I remember individuals at the school working with me to figure out how to pay for it, and then helping me get real world experience. And it was really the foundation, that education, that has, just helped me completely transform my life, and where, especially compared to where I started. And the last part I'll say is that, I in finance, I am often with men in a conference room at the board level or investor meetings. I am often the only woman in that room. And many times those men have degrees from Ivy League schools. Many of them have PhDs. And I sit there, and sometimes, at least in the beginning, I was intimidated. And sometimes I was embarrassed that I didn't have the Ivy League degree as well. And I have realized, as I have grown more comfortable in my role, that it's not despite of my Johnson & Wales degree, it's because of my degree from Johnson & Wales that I have the opportunity to sit there. And so my message is, really, I just think you should be incredibly proud of what you have accomplished right now. I'm sure everybody else has some similar story of things that they have overcome. And not only have you overcome something significant, you're doing it during a pandemic as well, which I didn't need to deal with. And I think this degree is just going to set you up for tremendous success later on.
Well, Gina, that's an unbelievable story, and certainly a testament to a Johnson & Wales education. And I think it does speak volumes. I've been here 28 years. And when I think about our students, I used to work with employers all over the country. We had 4,000 students out on internship annually. And they would say, a Johnson & Wales student, how do they compare to other college students? And they would say they are the most hardworking. They will do anything that we ask them to do, and they have grit and determination. And I you didn't say those words, but I definitely heard it in what you talked about. So it resonated with me. Thank you for sharing that. David, would you like to share a defining moment that changed the trajectory of your life?
Good evening, greetings. I'm also honored to be here and to have the opportunity to speak at this forum. So defining moment for me, I would have to sort of take you back to when I graduated from Johnson & Wales. I decided to not take, I guess, a traditional route and, go out into the workforce. I decided to start my own company at that time. And I ran that business for 20 years, operated it successfully until, I came to work for the employer that I work for now. I've been here almost 10 years. It was the first employer that I ever put together a resume for. It's a little sort of uncanny. But, what I wanted to mention is there's a belief in a certain segment of society that you have to be your own boss in order to truly be happy or fulfilled. And yes, I was happy, and yes, I was fulfilled for a certain period of time, but I felt that my skill set demanded a different conversation, one where I had the resources and the capabilities and depth of bench for my colleagues to truly help those that needed to be helped. So now I'm the lead advisor on multi-billion-dollar projects, and I assist my clients who have interests all over the globe, and that has ultimately been gratifying for me, and it has certainly shaped my future.
Thank you, David, very much for sharing that with us. And I would agree with you. We all seem to think we have a path, and we think that we'll just follow this path from A to B. But as we know, our careers take different turns, and we can't really understand why our career takes us in that direction, but all of the experiences add up to where we end up. And I think what you said about, you don't necessarily have to own a business, you can change what you've set out with and to learn other things, and look at how successful you've been.
And Maureen, you can feel that Your skill set deserves a different area of focus, but you don't have to shy away from trying to find that within the organization that you currently work for. You can join a committee, you can start a committee, you can seek a new initiative or practice within your organization. And maybe that leads to somehow your own branding or your own P&L responsibilities.
Great advice. Thank you. Paul, would you like to add to this question?
Sure. I mean, I have a story that I often tell, and when you think about people's careers, lots of them happen organically as they move through organizations, and then sometimes, and what happened with me was it's self-inflicted. And I was with Marriott for 14 years, and that's a long time to be with one company right out of, like, I stepped out of Johnson & Wales and into Marriott. After 14 years, I was bit pretty hard by the entrepreneurial bug. And I never thought that would really happen, because I really, truly had an unbelievable career at Marriott. It was the most stable career I could have ever imagined. I was traveling the globe. But this bug hit me, and it hit me hard. And I had an opportunity to leave Marriott and start my own restaurant company with two colleagues. And I made the decision to do that. I resigned from Marriott. I packed up my wife and 3 daughters, and we moved to LA from Bethesda, Maryland, and Virginia. My wife thought I had lost my mind, but we went there and we started this company, and we grew it to 100 restaurants. And if you asked my family, getting there was very, very difficult, but they would tell you today it was the best 6 years of our life. And I truly don't believe I would have the success that I've experienced in my career without taking that difficult step and seeing if the entrepreneurial track was for me. David did it out of the gate. I waited 14 years to do it.
It certainly takes courage, no matter what time in your career you do that.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
David, I'm going to switch back to you if you don't mind. There are multiple challenges facing businesses right now. Can you speak to those that are imminently facing your industry?
Sure. I mean, with the industries that I focus on, it's sort of broad-based. I focus on a number of different industries, but I want to highlight 2 disruptions, quite frankly, that I feel really compelled to share. One is cybersecurity, and 2 is mega storms. More than ever, cyber defense strategies matter to individuals and organizations. Most of us are aware of the strike against Colonial Pipeline. They paid hackers $4.4 million in ransom. JBS beef supplier paid $11 million in ransom. Ransomware increasingly seems to be the weapon of choice. US companies right now are paying 400% more in ransom payouts in 2021 compared to 2019. The average cost for a ransomware attack is a staggering $1.8 million. It is also interesting to note that over 90% of the breaches are a result of human behavior. I'm going to repeat that. Over 90% of the breaches are a result of human behavior. Please do not be the employee that picks up the thumb drive that is laying on the ground in your company's parking lot, and certainly don't be the employee that takes that thumb drive and inserts it into your company's laptop because it has your company's logo on it. That's what the bad actors are waiting for. The second disruption is megastorms. Since 1980, there have been 290 natural disasters in the United States, costing more than $1 billion each. In total, these super disasters have caused more than $1 trillion in damage. In 2020 alone, there were 22 separate billion-dollar disasters across the United States. That's more than triple the historical average of 7.1. Some believe that this activity is caused by higher temperatures. Some believe that this activity is caused by the changing ocean. And then there's extreme rain events. We've all seen these rain events recently. According to studies, the frequency of extreme one-day rainfall events have increased with 9 of the top 10 record rainfall years occurring since 1980. So how do you guard against these disruptions? First, you have to think ahead to the next event. Take the opportunity to do a diagnostic and a deep review of your current coverage. Do a tabletop exercise. If it's an individual, okay, what happens if the tree that's in front of my house falls on my house? What happens if the neighbor's tree falls on my house? If it's a business, do that tabletop exercise as well. What if all my vans or trucks become flooded? What type of information do I need in that event? How does my coverage respond to that event? And what do I need in order to get back into business? The key to all of this is really to hope for the best, but plan for the disruption.
That's some great advice, David. And your example of the cybersecurity threat and someone picking up, and putting something into their company computer is a great example, because I think a lot of people would not think about that. They say, oh, somebody dropped this. Let me see who it is that I can get it back to them. So I've never heard of that before. So great advice to give to our audience today. Thank you for that. Paul, would you like to address this question?
I think as we think about restaurants specifically, there are really a lot of things happening in our business, primarily related to COVID. The labor shortage is certainly one of those. And the labor shortage for us is certainly something we experience at the restaurant level. And us being a 99% franchise business is something we spend a lot of time on, helping franchisees understand that this is not just a restaurant related issue. This is completely a vertical upstream issue. So it's our suppliers for supply chain, it's our manufacturers that supply the supply chain, it's our farmers that supply the distributors. So the two biggest issues for us are the availability of labor and where did that labor go? Nobody has been able to crack the code yet. I'm sitting here in Phoenix at the Restaurant Leadership Conference, and all we're talking about is supply chain and where did the employees go? We're still trying to figure out when they're going to come back and at what level. So it's very difficult to run a restaurant without the food or the people. Those are the two things that define a restaurant. And so we're working hard to right the ship on that.
That's great. It's nice to know that you're at a conference and that you have leaders with you to help resolve that. Gina, would you like to answer that question?
Well, I might just pile on the labor shortage side of it. And, I think it's probably across all businesses right now, but I can tell you, especially in life sciences and the biotech, I'm right here in Boston, the Cambridge area. There are companies that are approaching, 40 to 50% attrition rates right now. I'm at a company that certainly has a high attrition rate as well due to multiple reasons, including the fact that about a month ago, we split into 2 different companies, and just that amount of extra work on people, along with, a significant change at the company does, typically increase, the number of people who will depart voluntarily. At the same time, it's year end. Bonuses are paid at the beginning of the calendar year as well. So a typical cycle would see more people resigning in the first quarter of every calendar year. So I am already short-staffed, and we are planning that even more people will depart in the first quarter of the year. And there are I'll speak in my finance silo, but this really applies across the company. But we're a publicly traded company. We have reporting deadlines that we need to make. And we have holes in the department, and it's really difficult to meet the demands without continuing to overwork the people that we have then, which is just this endless cycle where then more people leave because they're burnt out. And at the same time, I mean, a typical solution is to get a few consultants in, to bring in a few consultants, augment your staff, handle the peaks, but the consultants are overworked and they're already booked as well. So what we're facing is that we can't even bring in additional resources to the level that we want as well. So we need to continue to think through how we can divide work, what work is really, truly optional that we don't need to do during, a peak cycle when we have reporting deadlines. It's a really difficult place to be. And, we need to think about how we can be competitive and compete with other companies for labor right now.
It's interesting to hear you say optional work, right? I think pre-pandemic, I don't think any of us would think that way, but when you're short-staffed and you can't get the resources that you need to prioritize your work and determine what's really important, what's really critical for the organization to succeed.
Right.
So, David, I think we moved into our next question a little bit with this. So talking about the phrase, the Great Resignation, and it is used to describe this time in our country. Is there any more that you would like to add on this topic? Give us some insight into how your corporation is reacting to this shift.
Certainly. Thanks, Maureen. So 4.4 million employees said, "I quit" in September alone. Many believe that, yes, it's called the Great Resignation, but more and more people are starting to understand that it's sort of the Great Reckoning. The movement is more about who is quitting their jobs rather than the sheer number of people doing it. The consultant firm Mercer, who happens to be the global leader in talent, benefits, and consultant for human capital. I must note that it's important to note that Mercer is an operating company of Marsh McLennan. In this survey, Mercer finds that only 28% of respondents said they were seriously considering leaving their current employer. That is actually consistent with historical patterns. I believe that the low-wage frontline workers are more likely to leave. The server who used to work for three different restaurants now has to transition, and those folks are transitioning into other careers, like a longshoreman, for instance. So instead of an average wage of $14 an hour, that person is now making $40 an hour with a 401k and time to go to her children's soccer games. I believe that over the course of the pandemic, a lot of frontline workers had the opportunity to take a pause, reflect, and pivot to a job that they would consider more fulfilling. So how do we head off the burnout of people who decide to stay in those frontline positions? One, you embrace the flexibility. You create a space where employees can be heard. And three, you focus on pay and benefit, engagement, and wellness. When I say benefit, engagement, and wellness, consider providing unique benefits, college tuition programs, loan counseling, child daycare benefits, discount, buyers program, all delivered to the employee on the company app right to their smartphone. And it also must be noted that this sort of Great Resignation, it's not just a domestic problem. This is a global issue, right? In addition, there were challenges in retaining employees even before the pandemic.
Yes. Well, I think you came up with some great suggestions there. We've seen some, large corporations, Amazon, Walmart, all announcing tuition benefits to their employees. So it's nice to see some changes that are happening that support employees and allow them to have a path to other positions and move up in the organization with education. Paul, I'm going to shift to you now. The world has been struggling with supply chain issues since the pandemic and shows no sign of abating anytime soon. How has the current supply chain issues affected your business, and what have you done to remain nimble in an unpredictable time?
One of the things I will tell you, Maureen, is that as talked about at the conference here, there is light at the end of the tunnel there, and they are projecting the end of Q2 of next year, the beginning of Q3, that the supply chain woes will start to ease a little bit. When we think about restaurants and supply chain, again, it's the vertical issue, and in a franchise business, we are in a position where our restaurants today are shorted almost every delivery of products that they need to run their restaurants. You order 50 cases of chicken and 20 show up. So what are we doing? And we're all seeing this because we're all dining out more and more now. You're seeing modified operating hours. You're seeing modified menus where not every menu item is offered anymore. And that's no different in the restaurants that we operate. We have to react on a day-to-day basis to the supply chain. And then you'll see restaurant operators, the franchise community, is doing what they feel they have to do to support their business and make it survive. So they are going to Costco and they are buying product. And that's happening on a day-to-day basis. The two shining lights on this are one, the consumer knows this is happening, right? Because they're experiencing the same shortages at home. Their Amazon shipments are not coming anymore. Everything that they buy is delayed for months and months and months. If you're trying to build a house right now, you can't, there's no wood, right? So the consumer knows that. The question is, how long are they going to sympathize with the restaurant operators for the modified hours and the reduction in menu offerings until this happens? And that's something that we talk about every day in the restaurant.
Well, I'm happy to hear some good news.
It's coming. It's coming, but it's still a ways away.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. Over 40% of Forbes Business Development Council noted that their greatest challenge moving forward was an overall growth and strategy to support growth. Specifically, the survey results pointed to concern with moving the businesses to the next level and establishing strategic partnerships and national and global expansion. Is this a concern for your organization, and what are you doing to address this challenge? And I believe, David, you were going to answer this question.
Yeah. Thanks, Maureen. As I think about growth and strategy, I think there is a tremendous opportunity for both individuals and businesses within the next 5 to 10 years. As individuals take this pause, right, and they align to what they feel are more rewarding careers, I think it's the perfect opportunity to meet the demand of company growth. And that demand is in the area of human capital and highly skilled workers. The generation that is known as the baby boomers are retiring at a record pace. The pandemic has also made them reflect and take pause on what's ultimately important in this stage of their lives. This leaves a tremendous opportunity for emerging workers to become proficient and meet those growth needs of the organization. My brother-in-law, Lixon, he just retired from his life insurance business that he worked for 50 years. And if you can imagine 50 years, right? How do you now sort of replace that thought leadership, that depth of knowledge? It will be challenging, but I think it's also important that the individual worker does not have paralysis by analysis. You don't want to wait for the perfect opportunity to increase your skill set or transition. You know, as I stated before, there's a tremendous opportunity in the near future, and you don't want to let that train pass you by.
Great. So investment in human capital, ensuring that your people have that opportunity to further their education, to feel that they have a career growth. It's a great way to position an organization for the future.
And the organization uses that skilled worker to increase the depth of their bench.
Yep. Succession planning, right? That's what we're talking about here. Great. Gina, I'm going to switch to you now. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is important now more than ever before. Tell us about some changes in your organization that it has made, and what are some of the results of this important work?
Sure. So first of all, I'll just start by saying this is an expectation across the company, and it is an expectation across all levels of the company. And the management team, of course, is committed to this, but I routinely get questions from our board on what we're doing. And even today, I got questions from my team, and I'll share that as well. But one of the things that I have learned, and this isn't just at Bluebird, but this was at Ironwood as well, and unless you have it staffed, right, and you make a commitment to make a change, and you have resources committed to making a change in what we would call DEI, you really won't make a change, right? You can't just state a goal and then assume that people will work towards that goal. They need tools and guidance to understand how to make a change. And so we, in both companies that I have been at, had stated goals, communicated those goals, and assumed that through our traditional hiring practices, but as long as we kept these goals in place, things would be different. And in fact, they're not, right? You really need to change your behavior, and you need guidance on how to change your behavior. And it takes time, and you need to be patient, right? The patience is important as well in the hiring, because it might take you a little bit longer, right? To source outside of your network and to think about how to really hit those goals. You know, I'll say, one of the things that I have found to be very successful is it's not just, you know, staff from the top with the resource, with the money and the people to resource DEI. One of the things that I found very successful is I once had a finance manager who decided to start an employee resource group. She had a passion. She felt very, very passionate about gender equality, felt that there was a disconnect at our company. It was unbalanced, especially at the higher levels. She started an employee resource group, and because she had the passion and the commitment, it was just, it was amazing how incredibly successful it was. And it ended up being our largest employee resource group. And it wasn't just women included in that group. We found that many men joined it as well, because they wanted to be supportive as well. So it was just a really nice group. And she deserves a lot of credit for running that. You know, I made a comment earlier that, you know, one of my employees asked me about this today. And we are, you know, it's the end of the year. We're working on our goals for next year. We came up with our corporate goals. There, of course, our DEI goals and our corporate goals. And like many companies, we take our goals and then we cascade them, right? We come up with functional goals, then we come up with personal goals, etc. And I have always, at my functional level, included a people goal, but I usually focus at a functional level on career development or work-life balance. And one of my managers said to me, I really want a DEI goal at our functional level as well. So it was interesting for me to hear that pull at a functional level, not just at the corporate level. And I, of course, agreed. I mean, it was a great comment. And then lastly, I'll say, I made a comment earlier that I'm often the only woman in the room, right? And I'm sitting around not our board. Our board actually has several women on it, but I have often sat around the table, and it's only been men in these roles. And it has made me realize that I need to set an example for the women at my employment or my companies as well, right? And I need to lead by example and do whatever I can to continue to help women advance in their careers.
That's terrific, Gina. Thank you. It's interesting to hear that DEI is at that functional level now. And, you know, I can't help but think of the expression, what's not measured doesn't get done. So it's very encouraging to hear that your company wants it in the goals and it wants it at that functional level. So I think you're on the right path for some great success there. David, would you like to address this question?
Sure, I'll jump in, certainly. There's a tremendous amount of increased dialogue about diversity and inclusion. It's due in part to the heightened attention focused on racial injustices and economic inequity. You know, there's no question of the benefits to an organization when you can collaborate with diverse backgrounds, diverse thoughts, diverse experiences. You know, I recently had dinner with a vice president of human resources, and he echoed the sentiment of other VPs of HR that diversity and inclusion is transitioning from a topic on the wish list into the nucleus of the organization's operating platform. Some studies show that by the year 2045, America will transition to a minority majority society. Organizations are implementing creative solutions and training programs for diversity and inclusion, without a question. Programs such as microaggression training, group activities that involve meal sharing, establishing mentorships for underrepresented groups, or simply celebrating diverse holidays. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that diversity and inclusion helps the company's bottom line. Studies show that it ranges anywhere from an increase of 19% to 35%.
That's great. Thank you, David. I agree with you. The research is there to show it. And I'm going to go back to a comment that Gina said in that, you know, her corporation, I think in general, we need to have patience as we're hiring people. We're always eager to fill that slot and to fill that position. But if we take the time and have the patience, we can attract a diverse workforce. And a diverse workforce in the end will, as you said, will benefit your organization. So well said there. Thank you. So I am going, the last question, you know, I don't really want to focus on it, but I think it is very important, and it is about COVID. You know, we certainly have gone through a year that we will never forget, and that has changed all of our lives and changed how we work today. It continues to wax and wane across the country, and I'd love to hear how your businesses have adapted to this new world of remote and hybrid work. What does the return to office plan look like? Is everyone back? Has it changed? Since you've been back, envisioned what you thought it would be. So Paul, if I could start with you with this question.
Our office in Dallas is a small office of 35 people, and we have remained open all throughout the pandemic on a voluntary basis. And it's been interesting to watch that the majority, I would say that 90% of the staff has continued to come into the office. The office is based in Dallas. It's a little different here in Dallas than some of the other cities. Their approach to the pandemic has been different through the political filters that are different in certain markets. I think really the pandemic for me personally, as I think about how it's affected our business, you know, throughout the pandemic, I was with, over the last 2 years, 3 different companies, and one of those companies I completely mothballed. The next company I stepped into in March of 2020, and my first 3 weeks I closed 700 restaurants. I mean, I personally was like medicated because I couldn't handle the stress of what that was like, thinking about how many hundreds of franchisees had their personal business and their lives at risk. You know, the good news is we all emerged from that, and we lost very few restaurants permanently due to the pandemic, and we're all back 100%. I think what we saw is that the franchise community can be very resilient and react to pivoting very quickly to delivery and third-party delivery and online ordering and curbside, where the dining rooms were closed. And as an example, in Fuzzy's, the sales actually lifted during the pandemic because the consumers still wanted the product and they figured out how to get it. Our job was to figure out how to get it to them. So I'm pretty proud of the team on how they behaved. And I'm hopeful that we don't have to go through this again.
I am too. I'll echo that sentiment. And, you know, I think I really appreciated your honesty there about how personally it was so stressful for you. And I think, you know, the country as a whole is struggling with our mental health and just ensuring that, you know, we're all, you know, feeling good about the direction that we're going in. So thank you for sharing that, because it was an
I'm not medicated anymore, though. Don't worry about it.
But you know, that honesty is very much appreciated.
Sure.
Great. Gina, would you like to address that question?
Sure. And maybe I'll just point out, you know, especially I've only been at Bluebird for 4 months, so I often cite Ironwood in some of these examples as well. But, you know, we would probably think about it in 3 different groups of employees. You know, we have the general office employees that have proven that they can just work from home, remote, as much as possible, and they do not need to be in the office to get their job done. We have Bluebird, it's Bluebird, so we call them lab birds. Our lab birds are obviously required to be in the office. And then when I was at Ironwood in the beginning of the pandemic, we had a pretty sizable sales force that was out there in doctor offices, you know, selling our main product, Linzess. And so we really needed to think about whether it was appropriate to have those sales reps there and whether that was safe and whether the physicians even wanted them in the office, right? You know, we were limiting, everybody was limiting in-person interaction. So each of those groups were handled differently. But I think your main question centers around just the return to office and the G&A staff in general. And it goes back, my answer goes back to this attrition rate. We need to be competitive. And what we have learned is that most people don't want to return to the office 5 days a week. They might want to return 2 or 3 days a week at max. And we cannot force people to return to the office if they do not feel safe. And we feel that we're going to lose them and they can do the work from home anyway. So we're trying to be really thoughtful, listen to our employees. We are not back in the office right now. Part of that is we're also moving space, and our new space will be available in March. But our policy will be, it's recommended that you come into the office, you know, preferred that you come into the office a few days a week. You can work with your manager and work out what is appropriate for you and your department. You don't get an office unless you commit to being in the, you don't get a desk unless you commit to being in the office 3 days a week. If it's anything less than that, you just sign up and you can, you know, find a place to sit for the day. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible. And we're also trying to use technology. So the last thing we want is, you know, somebody to show up in the office and then end up on Teams or Zoom calls or whatever all day long anyway by themselves in a conference room. Nobody wants to deal with a commute to end up sitting in a conference room by themselves doing Teams calls, right? Because that just completely defeats the purpose of being in the office. And so we're trying to be as thoughtful as possible and bring back people on the same days or groups at the same time where they can collaborate. And there's really a benefit of being together in person. So some of those details are still being worked out, and we originally planned on bringing back people earlier, but then with the Delta variant and the newest variant and our space, we're just not in a hurry to do that, and we feel that we won't be bringing people back until really March.
Yes, I think, you know, the workplace has changed, and so maybe for the better, maybe not for the better, but I think we certainly have proven that, you know, working from home, people can be productive, they can bring results. And even this panel right here, you know, typically 3 years ago, we would never have even explored the idea of doing something virtual. And, you know, here we are a year and a half later, and thousands of our alums have been able to participate and engage with the university. We've been able to engage all of you all in different states right now. So there's some silver linings, and I agree with you in that you really do have to justify why they're coming into work. They cannot be sitting at a desk looking at a computer and doing a Zoom meeting. So the strategy you have around that of ensuring that the day is productive and that they're actually working with people is a really smart decision on your part. David, did you want to add anything else to that before we move on?
Sure. I mean,
I
our
could tell.
organization,
I could tell.
our organization has, always had a sort of flexible work environment, a good work-life balance. As a professional organization, when you have executives all around the globe traveling and assisting clients, we've always sort of been remote for a certain segment of our colleague population. We've really continued along that trajectory. And I must say the flexibility that our organization gives us really, allows us to personally make the decision of where we want to be and how long we want to be there, which is really welcoming.
Great. Thank you, David. Okay, at this time, we're going to transition to questions from the audience. And bear with me here as I open up this piece of my computer screen. But, oh, great. Our first question is from Marquise Cooper. I know Marquise very well. I think he's graduated now probably 6 years ago. I might be wrong. Gina, he's a fellow accounting graduate and has had tremendous success in a short period of time that he's been out there. So his question is, can the panelists speak to any challenges on roadblocks they face while trying to climb the corporate ladder in their organization? Gina or David, any specific things you faced with being female or a person of color? Paul, anything specific that you face when trying to make a business successful? How did you overcome all of these challenges? So maybe Gina, we'll start with you, if you wouldn't mind, being a female from that perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's interesting. I actually took a walk with one of my direct reports at a prior company who is now a CFO, and she just had a child. So I'll tell you, I think I go back to having both my children at Varian, and my oldest is now 18, so I'm 14 and 18, right? And I think 14 and 18 years ago, it was very different for a woman climbing the corporate ladder to have kids in a controller and a VP role. And I believe I shortchanged my maternity leave and didn't really spend enough time with my kids. I took 5 and 6 weeks off respectively, I think, for each one, and I went back because I was not replaced during my maternity leaves, and I approached a quarter in and I knew I needed to get back for SEC timelines. And I don't think that challenge will apply to the women today, right, who decide to have children and return to the workforce. And I think it's a real benefit. And I was telling this woman I took a walk with on Sunday, because she had just had a child, her first child in September, and she was trying to think about returning and how to do it, and the nanny and everything else, all the decisions that first-time mothers make. And she has the benefit that it's 18 years later, and I think everybody is just aware and wants to be supportive of women in the workforce and keep them there and help them advance. And two, just with the pandemic, people are home more and they have the flexibility. And I think people, we all get an insight into everybody's home, right? And some people have kids every now and then in the background, or a dog or a cat or whatever. And it makes it very real for people to understand that work is part of your life, but it's not your whole life. Mm-hmm. And so I am optimistic that the challenges that I faced many, many years ago when I had my children hopefully will not continue to the same magnitude for the women today. And if for some reason they do, my advice would be your kids are incredibly important, so much more important than your career. As much as you love your career and you want to advance, if you're not at a place that is supporting you, then I would think twice about returning to that job.
Gina, I agree with you. I can't help but think about my own experiences. I have 2 boys, 23 and 19. And when I had my first child, I had a boss who insisted I come into the office, and it was only 6 weeks, just turned 6 weeks old. And I said, oh, I don't have daycare. He said, well, bring him in. And I can remember sitting in the boardroom and hearing my son cry outside. And, you know, if that happened to me today, I wouldn't hesitate to say, no, that's not going to happen. But hopefully we've paved the way, and that people understand that behavior is just not acceptable, and that we have to understand that, you know, there's a balance here, and it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. David, Marquise had asked, as a person of color, would you like to respond to this question?
Sure. Thanks, Maureen. I'm not sure if we have that kind of time today. Unfortunately, and fortunately, you know, there's challenges throughout, right? There's challenges throughout every step of the way. But, you know, I may be wired a little differently, and I can only speak from my personal experience. You know, I wasn't born in this country. You know, I come from a small place, small island, and it was ingrained in me early on that you really needed to take personal responsibility for every action and inaction that you do. And no matter what the challenges are that I've faced, and the challenges that I've faced, you know, throughout my career, I always went back to the fundamentals that, quite frankly, no one was going to outwork me. They could work as hard as I can. They could be as committed as I can, certainly, but it wasn't going to be because of a lack of effort. And I've always focused on, in my career, two components: my schedule and my budget. I've been stingy with my schedule and stingy with my budget. And I found success because of that, right? Let me give you an example. When I'm stingy with my schedule, it allows me to make commitments to my clients that go above and beyond. For instance, you'll never receive, David's out of the office, he's on vacation for the next 2 weeks, please see this person. That's a commitment that I've made to my clients throughout my career, that I'm always on, right? And I can do that from a healthy place, you know, whether I am, you know, it's a weekend. Yes, I'm checking my messages to make sure that I'm there for my clients. If I'm on vacation in Ecuador, yes, I'm checking my emails at 6 in the morning, at 12 noon, at 4 in the afternoon, and at 9 p.m. It's a commitment that I make to my clients, right? And those commitments, that work ethic, have always propelled me forward, despite of any, you know, challenges that I may have had.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Paul, this question's from you, and I'll apologize if I don't say this name correctly. Scott Leifrid, who says he was on a panel with you a few years ago. He says, great to see you. What do you believe to be the next service model to boom, much like order at the counter from the 2019 for better for you food? So I think he's asking, what's the next trend in the service industry?
Yes, Scott, good to hear from you. Hope you're well. As I think about what's happening in our industry, and again, I'm at this restaurant leadership conference with 2,000 people. Everybody here is talking about what is the new service model, and how do we grow our businesses in a post-pandemic area. And I will tell you that the ghost kitchen is something that everybody is talking about. How do I take my kitchen and layer in another brand to operate without a storefront, strictly for third-party and online orders to be delivered? And so that is, Wow Bao is one of the brands here out of Chicago that is really, they've stopped building brick and mortar stores to sell their product to anybody and everybody that might want to put their product in the kitchen and sell it out the back door. And so that is really what the discussion is about, and what everyone is trying to figure out if they want to play in that arena. You've seen, or you've heard, or you've read about the ghost kitchens that are being built specifically as ghost kitchens. So that's going to continue to evolve. But I think more and more it's going to be, I have a restaurant, can I put another brand in that kitchen and have it be a third-party delivery?
Great, thank you very much. This question is from Colleen Cardoza. I'd like to know if anyone feels this pandemic is perhaps a blessing in disguise. As for myself, I'm seeing employees requiring to be more valued now versus prior to the pandemic. My observations include seeing it unwillingness to return, and again, as David said, progressive growth of low-level employees. I was taught by Professor Brown at Johnson & Wales, pay for performance is important and pay for performance should be so much easier now as the pandemic made visible who is the strong performers are. I'm thinking this is the new trend. Would anyone like to address Colleen's question?
I'll take part of it. I don't know if I will address it specifically. Maybe the other two panelists, David and Paul, can chime in too. But so first, yes, absolutely. I'll tell you, it was last spring when I thought the pandemic was ending, which clearly it's not. But there was a part of me that was actually a little sad. And the reason I was a little sad about it is because all of a sudden I was home. And I was home for dinner every single night, and I was eating with my family. And for, whatever, ever since I had my kids, I would go to work a little bit later. My husband would go in really early. My husband that would come back. He would be the one who made dinner. He would eat with the kids, and then I would come back, and I missed the dinner, right? So we kind of staggered our schedules. And when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we were all home and we started cooking. We took a break and we ate our meals together. And I realized how incredibly special that is and what I was missing every single night. And I didn't want to go back to in the office and missing the meals every night. So that's a personal answer. I think you were asking more professionally if it's a good thing as well. And I think it is. I think that translates to just people in general taking care of themselves and thinking about what's right for them. And I know we see a lot in the resignations, but I don't think everybody needs to quit in order to take better care of themselves and think through what is right for them at their place of employment.
Great. Thank you, Gina, for sharing that. And I would agree with you. I think it opened the eyes to everyone of what were they missing during that commute? What were they missing working 10 hours a day? And we need to find that work-life balance. Would anyone else like to answer Colleen's question?
Good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to conclude our open session with our alum. I would like to thank all of the alums and our alumni panelists for such an inspiring and informative discussion. You all have tremendous responsibilities, and we are so grateful to all of you for taking the time to share your knowledge with your fellow alumni. On behalf of Chancellor Rooney, the faculty and staff, I would like to thank all of you. We are certainly proud of all of your accomplishments and everything that you shared with us today. So congratulations to all of you. Also, I'd like to thank all of our alumni attendees for joining us. I hope you enjoyed hearing from your fellow alumni. As alums, you know Johnson & Wales truly provides a unique and exceptional education that inspires success in lifelong personal and professional growth. Tuition alone does not fully cover all the opportunities that sets Johnson & Wales apart. Our university depends on donations from alumni to help sustain Johnson & Wales as a leader. If you're in a position to give back, please consider making a gift this evening to support our students and the future of our university. Thanks to a generous $50,000 matching gift from alum and trustee Rob Palesci, class of 1986 and 2014 honorary doctorate recipient, all gifts through December 31st will be matched dollar for dollar. If you would like to make a gift, you can do so and double your impact by clicking the link in the chat window at giving.jwu.edu. Thank you for your support. Lastly, I also encourage you to attend our last alumni event of the year, Sip with JWU, on December 14th, where we'll learn about pairing different wines with the festive charcuterie board just in time for the holidays. Register at alumnijw.edu. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you for our alumni panelists. I wish you all a wonderful evening, a happy and safe holiday. Looking forward to sharing many more great memories with all of you, our Wildcat family, in 2022. I hope to see you all at reunion in June. Thank you very much.
Thank you.